The national debt surpasses $15 trillion, showing no signs of slowing. I'm Alan Barton. Stand by for the front page.
How much is the United States in debt now?
Calculating. 15 trillion.
How are we spending so much more than we're taking in?
McCaskill charged 89 flights to taxpayers.
When was the last time the Dems wrote a budget for our country?
A speaker who did a magnificent job in 2 years, Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
That's pretty good, using the new Siri voice recognition machine from the iPhone 4S to make the point. Joining me in studio, Alon Giorno, a fellow at the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights, and Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. Terry, this number has gotten so huge and has been doing this for across multiple administrations, obviously for a long, long time. So how do we make sense of this? And how does this actually affect John Q. Public in their daily life?
Well, but put it this way: if you were to spread out this debt over every taxpayer, it'd be about $133,000 per taxpayer. So think of it as a second mortgage that you're going to have to pay for the rest of your life. And what it is it's people think that debt has no cost in some weird way, but it is a future tax. And so every year we're adding $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion to our debt, and that is a future tax of $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion that we are going to have to pay. And that tax cannot be paid or cannot be used for investment. It can't be used for consumption. It can't be used for anything other than debt service. So that is a very serious dead weight on our economy, and I'm afraid it's going to drag us down into European Eurozone levels of stagnation.
Alon, federal debt has increased well over $4 trillion just since Obama took office. He has set records for the speed of accumulation. Rarely has a president dedicated himself to the speed of accumulated debt like President Obama. So with that in mind, when he proposes something like his latest $447 billion stimulus, at some point you just kind of go like, well, go ahead, try it. I mean, it's just another $500 billion on the bill, like at what point do we stop the madness and how are we really going to stop it?
I mean, part of it is recognizing where our problems arose, and I think not tackling the enormous obligations we have to entitlement programs is a long-term guarantee that we're going to head over the precipice, because that is a huge
Oh, but we're getting that handled because the super committee in Congress is going to handle entitlements, on their way to what are they trying to do, 1 to 2 trillion? They're trying to handle 1 year's of deficit spread over 10 years while we're accumulating debt.
We continue
at $1 trillion.
deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And then it looks like they're just going to rewrite their own shotgun rule to have to do it. Robert Reich and MoveOn.org recently said there should be no government spending cuts, zip, until unemployment is 5%. So let's take a look at how he's making this work.
14 million Americans unemployed, 12 million more underemployed, wages dropping, and we're on the verge of cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education, infrastructure, children's health. Washington is on another planet, and it's up to you to bring it back to Earth.
All right, Terry, you hear this a lot, this reasoning, and you hear it directed towards, like, say, the Greek crisis, which they say, okay, so these people have overspent, they've got too much debt, so we've got to put on these austerity programs, but the austerity program cuts government growth, you get higher unemployment, more debt, higher ratings to borrow money, and it is a downward cycle to try to apply austerity to an overspending government. How do you answer that constant refrain?
Well, we know that's not true because we've looked at instances in history when they've spent more, tried to Keynesian stimulus out of recession, and it didn't work. It didn't work in the 70s, hasn't worked this time. In fact, it's failed spectacularly here and in Europe. It failed in Japan. Historically, we know that's true.
So is it a matter of then there is a short-term drop in economic activity because from the application of austerity? Because you are taking those dollars out.
Yes.
And it has to get sort of reformed and recalibrated.
There is, but the economy responds very, very quickly. This happened right after World War I, and it happened again right after World War II. We had a big drop in economic activity, and both times government cut back spending very sharply, and people thought, oh no, we're going to go into a depression. Not only did we not go into a depression, both times we went into sustained booms. The same thing would happen this time. If they went back, say, to 2007 levels of spending, We would have a huge influx in new funds for private business and job creation, and we'd have an economic boom.
Alon, what do you think in terms of, as you look forward, is there any hope? I mean, you've either got the borrowing, which is future taxation, or you can also inflate. And a lot of people are saying that the only way this is going to get wrapped up is through a massive inflation of U.S. currency. Do you see that as a possibility?
That is a very real possibility. I mean, if you've ever seen hyperinflation with people using wheelbarrows to take money to the grocery store to buy bread, you know that is the abyss. I think there is some hope if we can move the conversation to what the real issues are. So not fiddling around with 1 trillion here, 1 trillion there, but looking at it holistically and saying, we have to stop this and go to the source and really undo the problem over the long term. Now, it might not be an overnight solution, but there aren't overnight solutions to this scale of problem.
Well, this brings us back to this crazy extra constitutional super committee. What is your thoughts on how they're doing and whether they're going to be able to get anything done by their deadline and or at all?
Well, I suppose they will get something done, but even if they don't, I don't think it'll be a big deal. Look, $1.2 trillion in cuts will kick in automatically if they don't do anything. That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And people say, well, 50% of that is going to have to come out of defense. Well, actually, 50% of it is going to kick in from defense down the road. I think there's plenty of time to restore that if that should happen. So I would be perfectly happy to see them come up with nothing as long as they don't include tax hikes in whatever they do.
Well, what it looks like is they're going to come up with nothing and change the shotgun rule about the spending cuts.
Yeah.
Because they put themselves in a box and then they always have the key.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen, for Alon and Terry, I'm Alan Barton. You've been watching Front Page.